Rape Myths in the Media, Content Analysis of Local Newspaper Reporting in the U.S. Article by Megan Sachs, Alyssa R. Ackerman, and Amy Schulzberg. Presentation by Madison Riston, Dina Hanfield, and Anna Keene. Although sexual assault and rape are some of the most serious and violent crimes, they are also one of the most underreported and hardest cases to prosecute. There is also a large underreporting in the media, and when the cases are reported, they are typically reinforce some of the commonly known rape myths. These myths can impact decision-making by both victims and criminal justice actors. Every 98 seconds, someone in the U.S. is sexually assaulted, and this approximates for about 322,000 victims per year. The first definition of rape was a man forcing intercourse on a woman that is not his wife. This definition has drastically changed over the years. Some of the new definitions are gender neutral, employ the term sexual assault for anything that is not vaginal penetration, and they allow offenses to happen within marriage. Since there are now various definitions, it can be hard to determine what is rape and what isn't. The UCR only reports rapes, and the NCVS counts sexual victimization reports, so it can be very hard to accurately measure sexual assaults and rapes as a whole. There is also a lack of reporting of sexual assault and rape cases. Only 15 to 20% of people report these acts to the police. Some of the reasons people don't report to the police are fear of retaliation, people feel it's only a personal matter, they did not believe police would help, or the victim was drinking or using drugs at the time of the assault. Reports of sexual assault are very similar to the funnel of justice. For every 1,000 rapes that happen, 310 of them are only reported, 57 of them result in arrest, 11 will be prosecuted, and 7 will serve time. 73% of sexual assaults involve someone the victim knew, and 60% were assaulted in their own home or a friend's home. Therefore, the misconception that rape happens in a dark parking lot with a stranger is wrong. Another common misconception is that women make up false rapes when only 2 to 8% of reports are actually false. These common misconceptions and rape myths are myths because they are largely unsupported by research, but even if there was evidence to contradict these myths, people would still challenge the evidence and support the myths. Myths that blame the victim are like, she wanted it, she was asking for it, or she's lying. Myths about the perpetrator would be, he didn't mean to, or he couldn't help it. These rape myths allow people to think that there are good things that happen to good people and bad things happen to people that deserve it. This allows for people to believe that people who are raped deserve to be raped, which is very wrong. In the media, they depict rape either as something that is not a big deal, or they blow it up and start blaming the victim and making assumptions about the perpetrator. Rather than asking the question as to why the rapist would assault the women, they automatically call him deranged and sick. Instead of getting sympathy for the victim, they blame them and say they drank too much, dressed too sexy, or they provoked the rape. The media is also always includes at least one myth when they report the rapes. The myth that is most commonly used is she's lying. The media always tends to report on celebrity assault or rape cases rather than local cases. This is bad because this is where our misconception of these things come from. The media needs to cover more local cases because they need to draw attention to the subject and show people this happens with normal everyday individuals.
The sample size the researchers used was 9 newspapers organized by state and geographical regions. The researchers used the database LexisNexis, which is a news coverage program, and when LexisNexis did not have the right information, they moved on to the next biggest newspaper in the region. The researchers carried out their search for articles by looking for ones that contained the phrases rape and/or sexual assault in the article's headline. Due to those qualifications, thousands of articles came up, so the researchers narrowed down their findings to a period of 1 year from January 1st, 2011 to January 1st, 2012. There were a total of 386 articles. The specific testing that the researchers used were various chi-square tests that focused on the relationships between physical force used and sympathy for the victim, victim resistance and sympathy for the victim hospitalization and sympathy, alcohol being involved in sympathy for the victim, and lastly, the relationship between the victim and the offender and the sympathy for the victim. These findings indicated that sympathy for the victim was higher if the attacker was a stranger. The two questions the researchers aimed to answer were, how persuasive is rape myth language in local newspaper reporting, and is the media using other indirect language that reinforce rape myths? The coding scheme that they used was borrowed from Turkowitz. The guidelines for the coding system that they used was as follows. 1. Victim lying. 2. Victim asked for it. 3. Victim wanted it. 4. Victim partially responsible. 5. Perpetrator couldn't help it. 6. Not traumatic or not a big deal. And 7. He's not the kind of guy who would do this. At the end of coding, there were 2 coders who read and went through every article, and when they were finished, they compared their articles and checked for discrepancies.
This article concludes that even though the media isn't explicitly praising rape myths or misconceptions, it does not mean that they aren't indirectly using language that supports these misconceptions. It has been proven that rape myths have and can influence legal decisions. It has also been proven that mostly newspapers and television convey the message of these myths. Researchers chose 9 different local newspapers from around the U.S. and found 282 articles about a rape happening. In these articles, there were 226 perpetrators, ages ranging from 13 to 78, and 131 victims, ages ranging from 18 to 82. There are 2 major elements that were highlighted throughout these articles. These major elements are a part of a factual crime report. First, the relationship between the victim and the suspect is an important aspect of a rape. 56% identified the victim as a stranger, 32.6% identified the victim as an acquaintance, 5.7% identified the victim as a partner or ex, 3.5% identified the victim as a family member. Another important aspect of the rape is the elements of the crime. 17.8% mention whether or not the victim resisted. 20.2% report injury to the victim. 56% report use of physical force. 14.6% mention alcohol involvement. 28% report the use of a weapon. And 13% reported hospitalization. Researchers developed a coding scheme that included different rape myths and the phrases and narratives that supported it. The researchers were specifically interested in whether or not these variables were heavily present in print media. For example, only 1.5% report that the victim is lying, only 5.8% question the victim's behavior, 2.9% mention the victim's looks, 7.3% question the victim's credibility, and so on and so forth. These findings show that newspapers rarely report the direct rape myth narratives. Researchers had a very limited scope. They only used local city newspapers. To truly conduct research on the presence of rape myths in the media, researchers need to investigate national and local news, magazines, national newspapers, etc. The best way to get a decent sample size and accurate information would be through TV, since that is where mostly everything is reported and received in these current times.